Hi, welcome to Actual Spinster. My name is Anna Marie. Today I'm not actually going to talk about books, I'm going to talk about films that I loved recently. In 2022 I did a 2021 favourites, like early in that year. I did a favourites video and I talked about a bunch of films that were my favourites, but then in 2023, because I had an absolutely appalling health beginning and honestly continuing, but whatever, start to 2023, I never did something like that because I just didn't really have the spoons. But that does mean that like I have a bunch of films that I kind of did want to talk about at some point. So recent basically means this year and last year. But the ones I'm going to talk about from 2022 that I watched then, not necessarily that came out then or anything like that, are only like really the like top favourites versus some of the more recent ones that I've watched this year. There are some favourites and then there are also some like lesser favourites too, but that I just wanted to talk about anyway. Before I do get started though, I just want to show you how cool this is. I've never knit a glove before, which is why this is cool. Obviously if you knit gloves, like I'm sure you're like, yeah, whatever, normal things. But look, it's very cool. Very happy with it. One of the reasons why I was sad that I didn't get to do this was because in 2022 I found two of my favourite all-time films, so I felt like sad that I didn't get to talk about those really. So I just realised I haven't like written down any of the directors for any of this. I'm sorry, but I will be putting a picture of the film poster. I do think that there's like an honourable shout out before the like all-time favourite films is Newsies. The like musical about like turn of the century newspaper boys going on strike. It's, you know, and it's like so funny. Their accents are absolutely terrible, and yet it's like it's just so bad, but it's just a great film. I 100% recommend watching it. I watched it with Mari and we both really enjoyed it. It was great. This is so funny to go from Newsies to the next ones, but that's fine. So a film by Agnes Varda. I haven't watched that much of her stuff. I've watched like a couple of her films. You know, like I want to watch more. I'm just sort of like going slow, I guess. There's no rush to watch all of her films. But a film that I watched is called Un chante, l'autre pas, or One Sings, the Other Doesn't. It's from like the 70s, I think, and it has very big like 70s feminist energy, and I just really loved it. It's about these two different women and they have this chance meeting where I think the first one is 17 at the time and the other one is maybe like in her early 20s, and she helps her get an abortion and they have this chance encounter and then they don't see each other for years, but we sort of follow both of them and then they do re-meet again when their lives are both pretty different than they were and also kind of the same, or like, you know, the same kind of themes of like oppressive patriarchy are present in their lives too. And it's just really beautiful. I loved it so much. I loved how it's a film about reproduction. It's a film about like, you know, it does this wonderful thing where it says like accessing abortion is a really fundamental act of feminist healthcare, of like feminist struggle. We should be fighting for people to be able to get abortions just like whenever they want them, and with, you know, compassionate care and dignity. And also simultaneously that mothering and caring and bringing a child into the world is also like a really phenomenal and beautiful act too, and is also something to care about and think deeply about and share collectively. And it's just really wonderful. And like I love the way that it kind of centers one of them, who is called Pom, I think is what she's called, maybe, I can't quite remember. She and like her sort of band, they go into like the French countryside and they put on these like performances for various little villages, so you get to see some of them and they're so creative and beautiful. And then there's this like one amazing bit where like they sing a song where they're like, oh, I'm gonna butcher it if I try, but you should look it up. But basically like they sing a song where they talk about Frederick Engels. It's just really great. I'd really recommend it. And they sing this really lovely song about being pregnant and like being like a fat dream. And so there's that film. Another film which has quite similar themes, or like one of them definitely, which is like mothering and caring, is Kajillionaire, which is directed by Miranda. And when I watched it, it just made me go insane. Like I just loved it so much. It's about being like so unbelievably lonely. It's about being like touch starved, and it's just like, it's about needing. It's about like needing to be attended to. It's about like really fucked up family dynamics, but also finding love. It's queer. It's just, it's really lovely, and it's also like quite like a game. Like it engages a lot with like very emotional things, but it also has like a playfulness to it that's nice. And Evan Rachel Wood plays like a really sexy long-haired butch in it. It's just really lovely. I think it especially speaks to like, you know, the touch-stuffed lesbians out there, but I also think it speaks to a wider audience as well. Yeah, I don't really describe the plot. I guess like it's basically about like a family of like con artists, and they kind of live this like bizarro life and trying to like, you know, scrounge their way and con their way into like money and survival, and then they meet this woman whilst they're doing the scam, and she kind of changes things a little bit. So those are the films from 2022. Now for the recent films from 2023. In the past 3 years I have, or maybe slightly more than that, but like, you know, recent years I have been really trying to watch films because I really struggle to watch things I haven't watched before, and then, I mean, that's sad because I'm obviously missing out. So, you know, I have been trying to like put effort into watching things that I want to watch and like watching things that I haven't watched before. And I guess one way to kind of like help combat some of that difficulty is to watch things that you really are enthusiastic about. And also I do like often look up content warnings, which help me a lot. So yes, anyway. Okay, so I have 11 films to talk about from 2023. Some things I think I'm just gonna do like an honourable mention. There's one film that I really want to talk about now because I feel like it follows on really nicely from One Sings, the Other Doesn't and Kajillionaire. I didn't give this 5 stars, but I did love it a lot, so I am going to talk about it now. So that's Le Rouge et le Noire. It's about a heist. Again, you see similar themes to Kajillionaire to some degree. It's basically like a mum and a daughter, and they speak this like made up language to each other, and they're trying to, it's also sort of like a biography. It's like an experimental film. Like it doesn't tell you a particularly like clear story, and you just kind of have to gather it yourself. And then there are sort of like, yeah, bits and bobs. But basically it's sort of like a biography of a camera and a camera company. Is it called like Acton? I can't remember, like a French one. And this particular director, and it's because this mother and this daughter, they're trying to like plan a heist or carry out a heist in order to steal, I think the camera is called a Penelope, to steal it for somebody. And yeah, it's just like very weird. You have to just go with the flow, like, but I just really loved it. I really enjoyed it. I think, you know, when I looked at people's reviews on Letterboxd, people were not very happy about like how it didn't make any sense or like whatever, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes people are like, I am owed stories that make sense, but it doesn't really match with like 80% of like oral stories, does it? Like, and I can't remember the names, but like there is a way that this is engaging in like sort of mythologizing, yeah, just like a playfulness that's like fun to watch. And also obviously like the mother and the daughter, they speak a made up language, so that they're part of it is that like they have a world that we can't be part of because we're not them, although you can definitely understand bits and bobs of it because it's obviously it's made from a bunch of different languages, I think, and you know, that's sort of part of it too, isn't it? But then that's also, I guess, what is making a film. I sometimes think that one of the reasons why I'm like really interested in films, or like I love hearing about people talk about their experience of films, like making a film, being part of a film, is not because I love the film so much, it's because there's a level of like collaboration and inclusion between the people who make a film that's like so fantastically beautiful. It's so creative and it's so special, and it's really inspiring to me, to the extent that then you can either sometimes take those like feelings into watching the film and be like, oh, that film is amazing, or you can be really deeply disappointed in a film because you're like, oh, but I loved the energy between the people that made this. I loved their spirit and their chemistry and like all of that stuff, but it just didn't come out in the film. Yeah, I don't know. If you are interested in like real-time updates from me watching films at like 2 a.m. after never speaking to anybody for 2 weeks, I'll leave my Letterboxd in the description box. I think I want to give a shout out to Porco Rosso, which is a Studio Ghibli film. I really enjoyed that. It's a lot of fun. It's anti-fascist. There's also this great line which is like, so basically the main character is like a pig who's a flight person, and it's not like he's in a world of pigs who can do that type of stuff. He's like special for it, so you kind of are trying to figure out what's going on, why he's a pig, but he's like this incredible flyer, and Mussolini is trying to like recruit him, I think that's right, and he is against that. So there's this like great line where he says something like, better to be a pig than a fascist. So true. shout out to pigs everywhere. But then obviously you do have the whole like pigs being cops thing, but like it's not that. It's like not better to be a cop than a fascist. It's that like being a literal pig. And as somebody who was called a pig growing up in a derogatory manner, I really felt that. And then another one that I wanted to give a shout out to was Corsage, which has my favourite, Jenny Marks, Vicky Krieps, is that her name? I can't remember. In as the Empress, blah blah blah. It's like very intensely eating disordery, so be mindful of that going in. But I thought it was an interesting film, and I liked how it played around with like history, but then also like our own assumptions towards history, and to like how telling historical stories kind of inevitably changes them. But also I felt like it was making more of an interesting point than that. I do think it quite fits with the way that like, I don't know, the sort of like depressed woman novel of the moment, but it does that with a woman, you know, 200 years ago. I liked it. I thought it was also quite beautiful. There were scenes that were very beautiful. Okay, so the last two in this tier are probably like the upper parts of this tier. So the first one is Hester Street, which is a black and white film. I think it's maybe from the 70s. It's about Jewish immigrants to New York. It's specifically about this one guy, and he like goes there, and then he's, you know, made his life there for a little while, blah blah blah, and then his wife and their son arrives, and it's kind of about what that does to their relationship and to him and his sort of like assimilationist dreams. And she is, I don't remember what she's called now, Gittel, something like that, and she is like a traditional woman from a shtetl. Like she still, you know, is wearing, when she arrives she's wearing a wig, she's covering her hair, she's doing things that like in New York aren't like really done in the way that they were in her hometown, home place. Yeah, and like it's pretty sad, but it's also sort of romantic, and there's also some really amazing sort of footage of like a divorcing ceremony, like a get. So yeah, I just sort of, it was nice, and I liked how it felt like a really sort of sweet look into a really particular world and a really particular time, and I definitely recommend it. This year also my like film watching was like massively indebted to Mubi because they had like a summer deal where you paid like £4.99 or something for like 3 months of Mubi. Sorry, I'm in like pain, which is why I'm like moving all around. And then the last film is the most recent film, I think, yeah, that I've watched on this whole list, and that is Children of Shatila. It's a short film, and it is on Netflix, or it was when I watched it, and it is about Shatila, which is a place in Lebanon, and it has a refugee camp, which was, I think, started in like very early after the Nakba, which had Palestinians in it, and then also there were these like famous, that's not really the, you know, like infamous massacres that were carried out there, and of Palestinians and some Lebanese people also. And then Children of Shatila is this really sweet film that looks at the lives of children in this sort of aftermath. I can't remember when it was made, maybe the 90s, I'd want to say. So yeah, I think the massacres were carried out in the 1980s, and a lot of the children and the people involved were disabled in some capacity. We follow, I think I remember 2 specifically children, one of whom is this boy, and he was in like a crash of some sort, so he has recovered enough to be able to walk, but he potentially has some kind of brain damage. It's not very clear, but like he is impacted in his capacity to like think and concentrate, and he's pretty young and he has various jobs and things like that. And then this other girl who's evidently extremely smart, and she sort of does know it, which is like sweet, and she has this dream. I think she talks about wanting to be a doctor. I think it just engages really beautifully with the imaginative capacity of children, and in a way that like just feels very special and like caring in a way, and like they have a conversation within the film. It's also one of those films where like you might have seen clips from it online because there are just some really beautiful scenes, and it engaged children in the filmmaking process too in a way that I thought was really lovely. But yeah, there's this scene where they're like painting what they're in school, like what Palestine looks like, and the girl says something like, it doesn't really matter what it looks like, it's doing the imagining that matters, which I just thought was like so sort of special and sweet that she like articulated that. And I don't think it's like super depressing, even though it's dealing with very sad stuff, and you know, a lot of the adults involved, even if they are like, oh, I want to return to my homeland, they also are quite like sad about the shape of their life because, you know, it's not what they wanted to be. There's like a great scene that definitely goes around the internet where it's these children and they have the camera and they're talking to an older man, and they're just talking about like, you know, do you want to return to Palestine, or like, can you imagine doing that? And he is talking to them, and it's very special. So if I can find clips of those things, I'll leave it below, but you should just watch the whole film. It's really lovely too. I would also really like to know some more about like the process of making that film. I haven't done any research into looking into it, but yeah, I think it was made by a woman director, and there are a couple times when she like gives the camera over in a way, or like one of the cameras over. I would be really interested to know about like how the children involved actually did feel about the process of like being in the film, or like if there's any reflections later on. I don't know. Okay, so now we get to the creme de la creme. Okay, I have 5 films to talk about. Let's just go from the like furthest away that I watched. So this is Saint Omer by Alice Diop, I want to say, like a French director. And this film is, I can totally understand why people wouldn't like it. Like, it's kind of like, it honestly kind of blew my mind that this is what a film could also be, because it feels so like a character study of, in terms of like what you get from a novel in a way, or like the slowness of pace, or I don't even know if there's pace, there's just like, it's almost like a film that is described to you. But I really loved it, and it is about this woman who's on trial for the murder of her baby in France. And the sort of through lens is through this woman academic. But yeah, she goes to this trial because she wants to write about the woman. I think partially because she's writing a book about like, what is it called when you infanticide and like women and stuff. And there's definitely this like connection, or like this through line in terms of the story of Medea. So it's sort of playing with that myth making. It's also very focused on like a trial, which also obviously is another kind of myth making or like storytelling. And you know, who wins is sort of the one who can tell the best story for the jury or for the press. And I just thought it was fantastic. I really did. And I mean, it gave you some answers, I guess, but it didn't give you that many. I loved it. I also, I think looking back on it, I do feel like it's a film that really respects the audience. I feel like a lot of films that come out today are like spoon feeding people what they want, and then also people become less and less comfortable with having like a sense of mystery or confusion at the end of something. They need it to be like tied up, or like I said before, they feel like they deserve sense. And obviously that's also maybe part of like stuff that deals with violence, is there is sometimes this like idea that it's just senseless.
This is what I look like a lot of the time. I just wanted to say, I didn't really finish my point here. My point was that a lot of violence seems senseless, or that it's described as like senseless, and that's difficult to make sense of often. I mean, most violence is ideological too, and I feel like this film thinks about that in a way that's interesting. Like, it has the like ability to consider something that is horrible and upsetting in a way that doesn't just prioritize the like emotional response to the violent act, and instead thinks about the context in a way that demonstrates, yeah, the sort of like ideology of that violence, slash like the ideology of a world that produces a particular kind of violence. I hope that makes sense.
Basically, again, it's like very much about like mother-daughter, or like mothering relationships, and then it's also very interested in perversions of that, and like difficulties in that. And like, I don't really know if I could tell you that it gives you answers about any of those things, but I do think it was just a fascinating film to watch. Okay, so another film I watched was Can You Ever Forgive Me, which is like based on the real life story of a biographer whose biographies were going really badly, so then she started to forge, like sell really badly, so then she started to forge like letters from literary people, like writers, in order to make money. It's set in the 90s. The main character is played by Melissa McCarthy, and she's like butch in it. And like, I thought she did a good job. I thought she was hot. I mean, she's like a really grumpy butch. The biographer is called Lee Israel, like the real person as well as the person in the film. And yeah, she's a dyke, and obviously like 90s, we're sort of in the post/during the AIDS crisis, and yeah, and it's like she's not a very nice person, but I just kind of loved her. I loved how much of a meanie she was. She makes like a friend who was also kind of a meanie. And it's just basically a great film of like faggot fight. It's a great film of dyke faggot solidarity and just kind of like funness. It's also like quite literary, obviously, so I really enjoyed it for that. Okay, the next film that I did love a lot, I want to do like a disclaimer. I don't know, like, okay, so this is Frances Ha, directed by Greta Gerwig, who we all know is the latest like independent darling to not be independent anymore with her stupid Barbie film. And I mean, I was a fan of Little Women, to be fair, but I hadn't watched Frances Ha, and I kind of was like, I guess it's maybe time for me to watch it because I got interested, and I do think it's interesting to kind of chart her like her fall from sort of like more interesting, yeah, independent filmmaking into a kind of like mainstreamified like white woman voice. And like, that's not to say that like her work before then wasn't massively white womanish. Actually, I don't think Frances Ha is directed by her, is it? It's directed by her boyfriend, which I also really dislike. So if I try not to engage with any of that stuff around the film, I really loved the film. But I also think the film is very gay, which I also feel like is funny because Greta Gerwig, I feel like, makes films that are gay but not gay, and like she's doing it in a really straight way, but then her characters are often really quite gay. Like Frances in it talks about this like sort of alternate universe of like connection with her best friend, and it's just gay, like that's just being gay. But I really loved it. And like, again, I feel like similarly in terms of like Kajillionaire, where it just like spoke to a level of like loneliness and misconnection, and it spoke deeply to being attended to and witnessed and cared for in the world. And like the difficulties of that and how you have to be seen to some degree, and like, you know, it's also kind of heartbreaking. There's like a scene where Frances is like on the phone to her best friend, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna say something, but like I'm gonna hang up immediately so you don't feel like you have to say it back, like blah blah blah, I love you. And then she like hangs up the phone immediately, and it's just sort of, it's so sad, you know. She's also like designated as like the undateable Frances by some horrible guy that she lives with, which I also like highly identified with. Yeah, and I really liked how it played around with gesture and movement. She's a choreographer slash dancer, sort of like failing slash trying, and it is about like art, and it's also kind of about class. I think she's kind of failing and struggling a lot with like money and bills and being a dancer, versus like people that she like interacts with who are supported by their family in order to be in the arts, or to like just not do anything and like fuck around. I forgot it was actually directed by that guy, but I think the script was written by her and him together. Oh, I try not to think about it. Next film that I watched was really fantastic. From weirdly, understatedly, probably gay, but like not ever actually thought about by the people who made it, to a really genuinely like queer love story, time traveling, fun time, which is The Five Devils, which has Adele Exarchopoulos. I definitely might have butchered her last name, but she's like a French actress who I really like. I think she's like really beautiful, and I love how she is like very, I feel like the way she acts is just like very like embodied. Anyway, it's just like really beautiful love story. Can you tell that I'm just like obsessed with like mothers and daughters? But like, okay, so there's this girl, and she can smell things like really really well. She like, I don't know, she has like a real propensity for smelling things, and then she finds this thing which like kind of puts her back in time, and so she watches like her mum fall in love with this woman, and so she goes back in time and she like is watching this love story. So we get this past and present thing that's shifting through her time traveling, and I just loved it a lot. And it is like kind of sad, and you know, but at the end of the day, I feel like I'm like a cynic, but I also love love, so I also know that I didn't really talk about that film, but I didn't want to like spoil it that much. Okay, and then the last film I'm going to talk about is Polite Society, which I can't remember who it was directed by, but I'm pretty sure it's the same person who directed the We Are Lady Parts Channel 4 like TV show, which is a lot of fun too. It's about this young British Pakistani girl who wants to be a martial arts like stunt person, and then it's sort of about what happens when her sister, who's older than her, is like potentially going to get married to this random guy, and she doesn't like that because she sort of feels like her sister is giving up on her dream, which is like to be an artist, and that means that she has to sort of give up on her dream too. It's like a film that's a love letter to like stunts in film, and there's a lot of like scenes like that. And honestly, normally I'm so bored by like a lot of action sequences. I find them like repetitive and like kind of stupid and like whatever. But because I felt like there was this real emotional connection, because the main character is so desperate to be a stunt artist and like a martial arts like person, and she has like amazing skill too, I found them enjoyable, and I felt like they were really genuinely part of the plot, as opposed to just like, I don't know, let's just blow things up and that'll increase the tension. And also obviously this is like a big like macho part to like action sequences in films that I find like very boring and I don't care about. But yeah, so this was just a lot of fun, and like I really enjoyed it. And like it's also, you know, it is quite like tropey because it's playing around with that. It's like very fun and like self-aware, and yeah, it's cute, and it's like cute friendships. And should I rewatch this? I feel like I should rewatch. Oh, and let me know your thoughts about these films. Let me know your letterbox and we can follow each other. Yeah, let me know if you have any recommendations based on these films. And yeah, I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye.